Welcome to this podcast is making me thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This episode 175. Today's guest from Dallas, Spencer for Hire, the Tony Award winning Broadway musical Nine, and hundreds of your favorite TV shows, including Murder, She Wrote, MacGyver, Touched by an Angel. And of course, she appeared in the classic season 3 episode of Seinfeld, The Subway, where she robbed George of $8 in a Mo Ginsburg suit. Please welcome Barbara Stock. Barbara, thanks for joining.
Hi, nice to be here. Wow, you made me sound so impressive.
You are impressive. And, for the fans, we've been after Barbara for years now. We're so excited. One of our favorite all-time guest stars on one of our favorite all-time episodes. So take us back, Barbara. January 8th of 92, The Subway aired. So obviously, you got the role before that. But tell us a little bit about how that role came about in late 1991. Was there an audition process? Tell us a little bit about how you landed that role.
There's kind of an interesting audition story about this.
Oh, okay.
I had watched the show some, and I thought it was great, but I hadn't paid any attention to who made the show. And I watched more like hour-long drama shows. But I was familiar with it, and I was very excited to get an audition for it. I hadn't paid any attention to the company that was making it, though. And so when I walked in the door, Andy Scheinman came walking toward me, who I had known like 6 years before. He had been a really good friend. And he was one of the moguls now at Castle Rock. So taking you back, I was friends with him through an old boyfriend named Chris, and also Martin Schaefer, who was also with Castle Rock, and Fraser Heston, who was Charlton Heston's son, and his wife Marilyn, who became my publicist at one point. And we used to go and play tennis on Charlton Heston's tennis court. And then we'd all go in the hot tub together, naked. So I mean, we were friends. And then when I did the Broadway show, Andy came to New York on business, and he came to see the show, took me to dinner afterwards. And I still remember that night sitting in this restaurant, and it was just this wonderful evening of just fun and laughter and enjoyment. And then the next day I went with him to Connecticut to visit his mom. So, we were pretty good friends. But Chris and I broke up when I was 30, met my husband 2 weeks later, and he kept all the friends. So I was 36 when I did Seinfeld, and I hadn't seen Andy in 6 years. So I walked in the door, and he's the one who came to the door to greet me. And I was like, Andy, it's been forever. Oh my God. I'm ready to go grab him and hug him. And he's like, and he's all serious. And it's like, wait, where's the fun Andy that I used to know? And well, he was like the executive producer of the show. And I realized in retrospect that he needed to be professional and not act like he was, giving special attention to, me, I guess, as anybody, I suppose. So, but his demeanor threw me. So he's like, okay, come on in. They're all ready for you. And I mean, it was like a theater full of people, it seemed to me. I hadn't looked beyond him, and he led me over to them, and it was like 2 rows, like a raised row, like in a theater. And it seemed to me like there were 20 or 25 people, and there probably weren't. My eyes glazed over. I didn't look at anyone really. But usually when you do a guest lead audition, there'd be like the producer, the director, the casting director, the guy who's reading opposite you, and maybe 2 people who, walked in on the lunch hour. It's not like a huge event. And this was. So so he said, okay, go sit down, and I was in profile to everybody, so I didn't see any of them. And he said, okay, go ahead and start. And so I say my first line, and I think I've made a fool of myself walking into the audition. So I'm really starting to get kind of nervous, like I blew it already. And so I say my first line in dead silence. And the guy playing George says his first line, uproarious laughter. And I say my next line, dead silence, uproarious laughter. And, and each line is going like this. And I'm like, why aren't they laughing at me? And I hadn't done, I just started really losing my confidence. And I hadn't done very many sitcoms, and I didn't really realize that I was the setup guy. My job was to set up George so that he could make an ass of himself. And, but I didn't realize that. And so I'm just losing my confidence by the moment. And all of a sudden, like, it occurs to me that I would just like the floor to open up and swallow me in my chair. That's how upset I was about the whole thing and really thrown off. But I got through all of it and I finished, and they said, thank you very much. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I just thought I'd made an idiot of myself and that word was going to spread far and wide and I would never work again. I mean, I just totally thought I had messed up. So later that day, I called my agent, and I had another audition that day, and it had gone really well, and I was sure I was going to get that. So I told her, I messed up on the Seinfeld. They didn't like me. I'm not going to get it. And but I'm sure I got the other one. And she said, well, Barbara, it's exactly the opposite. You booked the Seinfeld and you didn't get the other one. And she said, you should be really happy because it's a hit show. So I was like, how did that happen? So that's my audition story.
Wow, that is that's incredible. Wow, and just to kind of take us to, I mean, in the room, when you say there's so many people in the room, we have heard that, but and I know it sounds like it was hard for you to even focus on who they were, but what's interesting about that story is exactly what you said, is that you were the setup to George's like buffoonery and all his like lying and just being that lovable loser that we love in the early episodes. Is that the scene then, I'm guessing, that you did in the audition? Is that first scene when George is talking about the stock market and all of that? Do you remember? Is that the one?
They had me read both of them. And I actually, look at this. I have kept exactly 3 copies of scripts. This is the script. This is like the second draft, I think it says.
Wow.
Revised table draft. I kept one Spencer for Hire, one Dallas, and this one. And so I just read through the scenes and I realized like we cut a whole page somewhere along the way. And there were a few changes, but they tightened it up really well. And it turned out pretty good.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. Like you said, you were 36, so you were, into your career. You were doing a lot then, but you're human.
Going to auditions, and this only happened with men. Never women. No women ever said things like this, but they'd say, oh, we're really looking for a younger Barbara Stock. And if you see how I looked on that show, I mean, that was pretty amazing makeup and lighting, I guess. But oh my God, I thought I looked great and I felt great. And I remember being really nervous because I had to wear lingerie and I was so uncomfortable about the idea of it. But, the costumer got me the perfect thing that I felt good in. And so,
Yeah, well,
I'm really happy with it.
yeah, we'll definitely get into the episode. You certainly knocked it out of the park. But to your credit, you're a pro. Your friend was there. He threw you off, and you seem to win them over, which was great. Do you remember, we all know Larry David now. Was he in the audition, or were you just so like?
Oh, I have no idea. I think it seemed to me there were 20 or 25 people there, and I just couldn't even look at anybody. I just had to focus on what I had to do. And like I said, I was in profile to them, so I didn't see them at all, which I was actually relieved about. I didn't see them at all during.
So I know you mentioned your agent. What did you know about Scam Woman, as she's called on IMDb, but what did they brief you beforehand?
Her name, but they never used it, so I guess that's why they called me Scam Woman, because her name was Luann originally in the script. Yeah,
it's a lovely name. So you went in knowing about this character, and just incredible. I mean, if we just go to that opening scene, you're kind of just sitting on that subway, reading the paper, looking all professional, like you mentioned. And then obviously you're in 5 scenes, and and it seems that a few of other things got cut as well. But would love to take us kind of through scene by scene. That first, the subway is just an ultimate episode, right? Larry Charles wrote it. Just, I mean, it won an Emmy for crying out loud. But
I didn't know that.
yeah,
I didn't know that. How
oh,
wonderful.
I mean, it's such a unique episode, because it all took place obviously on the subway. But that, you're touching your leg, and then oh, looking for a job. You're looking at the classifieds. You and Jason had, you know an incredible chemistry there, and he was just kind of out of his best. And you asked me about the brokerage houses. I mean, you were that, like, you just looked so professional, and you kind of made him nervous. It was just kind of a beautiful awkward chemistry, if that makes sense. Where George
Okay.
George is kind of panicking the whole time, but yeah. What do you remember
I
about those?
think I was
Those
one of
first,
a long line of women who, just humiliated George in every way possible. And, you know, just, and he was so good at going down that road with you. So,
Yeah, it really is, as Chris mentioned, one of the all time best episodes. And I wanted to kind of touch on this part where, like, this is early season 3, and you touched on your agent saying, this is a great role, this is a huge hit, and there's a really big get, and obviously we were huge fans of the show at the time, as well, me and Chris, as far as watching it live, from the start. But the show had just gotten picked up after season of a kind of a short season, well, very short season 1. Historically, it's like one of the, they always talk about it was only 4 episodes of the first season. Then they had a short season 2, and then they finally got picked up for season 3, which made it a big hit, like you mentioned, and everyone started watching, and it became much bigger. But all that's to say, did you get any sense on the set of any of this, of, like, you mentioned you were in a lot of shows before this, maybe not as many sitcoms, but you were around sets. I was just curious what the overall kind of vibe on the set was with Jerry Seinfeld and Larry kind of running the show. Did you get a sense that they knew what they were doing? They were confident? Was it different than most other sets you'd been on? Just kind of get a sense of how they ran things, I guess, from a producing standpoint, like on the set.
my gosh, yeah. In fact, I mean, I thought they were huge stars already. To me, they had hit already, I felt. I was so impressed to be working with them. I was so excited to do it. And yeah, it was a big deal. And yeah, everything seemed to run like clockwork. I didn't, because of the kind of episode it was 4 separate stories on the subway. So I went to the table read, and everybody was in the room, and there were so many people sitting there that I didn't really know who all of them were. Um, so, and it was pretty intimidating, with everybody there, but an important thing to do. And the it just seemed like everybody really knew what they were up to, and they had figured out all their characters and everything. Anyway, so our episode, though, it was an unusual one. There was no studio audience because of the subway car on the stage. They wouldn't have been able to see what we were shooting. And I understand that was the first episode that didn't have one. And I don't know if they ever had another that didn't have a studio audience. So, but I was kind of relieved by that, because it's funny. I did this Broadway show. I was performing for 1,800 people every night. And yet, when I did a sitcom, the few that I did, the studio audiences scared me. It was hard for me it was just a different thing. So, yeah.
interesting. Yeah, to your point, very unique. Yeah, typically fans of Seinfeld, they're in Monk's, or they're in Jerry's apartment, or what have you. And this was the first one that kind of essentially featured none of that. I mean, at the end there with Monk's, but
I can tell you about
yeah,
my interactions with each of the actors.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that'd be
Tell us a
wonderful. Yeah,
little
that
bit
was
about.
yeah,
Didn't
we're gonna
have
get there.
many
Yeah.
except with Jason. So Julia was incredibly sweet and friendly and kind. Didn't talk to her a whole lot, but when I did see her, she was very open and positive and everything. And I didn't go near Kramer. He kind of scared me. So I don't even remember having a conversation with him. And then Jerry, this surprised me because he always seemed like, this goofy guy comedy character, and he had a huge comedy career already. But I had a brief conversation with him once. I have no idea what it was about, but he was sexy in person, and that really surprised me. There was a vibe that he gave off. Has anybody else said that?
Well,
Yeah, we've heard the It Factor. We've heard, some things
Yeah,
like that. Chris can
yeah. Well,
elaborate.
anyway, he was
well, no,
nice.
I mean, yeah, and he dated a few of the guest stars we've had on the show
Ah,
for sure.
Yeah, he has talked about. Yeah, we've had heard.
yeah. Well, I was married already.
Well, Kramer, you should have been
Yeah.
scared. We've spoken with
Yeah,
Michael
maybe I
Richards.
would have left my husband for him.
It's funny, but we spoke to one of his longtime girlfriends, Ann Tallman, during the show, and she just said, yeah, he wasn't what he was just one of the sweetest men you could imagine. So, that's just Jerry did have that cool factor. And then tell us a little bit about Jason. Obviously, you spent probably the most time with him.
Oh yeah.
And he's definitely the most of the refined actor, if you will, of the whole show.
Yeah, I didn't know when I worked with him that he had this huge Broadway career. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have talked to him about that more. We had lunch together one day, and I remember asking him, because this was always my fear, was, do you have a hard time remembering lines? And he has this sort of George quality as he's saying to me, well, no, actually, I have a photographic memory. And so I can just look at the script once and throw it away and start playing with it. And
wow.
Well, that's why you're a genius. So, yeah, really such a nice guy, and really fun to work with, and made me feel welcome and comfortable.
We have heard that. Yeah, one of his most famous monologues in Seinfeld was supposedly written on the spot. The marine biologist, and they just gave it to him, and he memorized, like you said, like 1 minute, and then gave it, for taping. Which is interesting because you mentioned you had the script with you, and maybe some things got cut out, and also I was very curious about this, and I don't know if it says it in the script, but the $8 is such a specific number and line and amount that just only Seinfeld knows how to do that. With like anything else wouldn't have been as funny. It was like
right, $8,
$10 on him. Nothing.
Yeah.
Just get $8.
It was supposed to be $8, $8 measly dollars, and somehow measly just, I don't know. It did not come naturally out of my mouth, and it didn't feel like something she'd say, I didn't think. But, I was hesitant to say anything, but it turned out they felt the same way. So I remember Tom and Jason and I discussing it. So.
That's really good to hear, actually, that they got that back and forth.
Tom Sharonis, of course, the famous Seinfeld director of seasons 1 through 5 you're referring to.
Yes.
So let's go back a little bit, Barbara. So you grew up in Illinois, is that true?
Right. Yeah. Downers Grove is a suburb of Chicago.
Downers Grove. Randy Macho Man Savage, also from Downers Grove.
Yeah, I think
Did you know him?
I went to high school with this brother. He's the
Professional wrestler.
Wrestler, yeah.
I was in high school with his brother, I think. Younger brother, maybe.
And then another Seinfeld alum,
well known around.
Denise Richards as well. I mean, man, all the I mean, that's what it says. That's what Google says. So, yeah, so there you go. So 2 Seinfeld alums from Downers Grove, and then you've had a wonderful career. And you started doing that morning talk show. Was it Mid-Morning Talk in Indiana?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I started out when I was a little kid. Yeah. My mom, when I was 5 years old, took me to see a high school production of Carousel, the musical, and I was transfixed, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, with something to do with that. So eventually I took children's theater classes, and in high school I was in a singing group, and I played Rose in Bye Bye Birdie my senior year in the high school musical. And then I went to Indiana University, and it turned out to be the perfect school for me. It was ranked #1 with Juilliard as a music school. I didn't want to major in music, but I got to study with an incredible voice teacher, Eileen Farrell. She had been a big star with the Metropolitan Opera, and she did jazz. And I took a jazz class with her, which was incredible. And then let's see what else happened while I was there. I was one of the hosts of something called IU Sing. It's this big what's the movie? Breaking Away. That was about the Little 500 race, and that's what I just totally lost my train of thought. I was the co-host of one of the events that weekend called IU Sing. And then later, you brought up my talk show. I auditioned. I got a degree in telecommunications because it allowed me to, it was actually kind of an easy degree, but it allowed me to do all the theater and music I wanted to. And I got minors in business and theater. And so I was in a broadcast performance class one day, and a friend of mine from the class came up to me and he said, I work at the local TV station, which I didn't know there was one. And he said, we have this morning show and the host is leaving. She's going to LA to make it big, right? And I think you should audition to replace her. So I did, and I got it. And the show aired in Indianapolis. It was like the, I don't know, 16th or 19th largest market in the country at the time.
And you were still in college?
Yeah, I did it the second semester junior year and my first semester senior year, and over that summer. Yeah, I did it for a year. And and I did all the interviews. I had a co-host in Indianapolis. And so, yeah, pretty good for a resume. In fact, I got a call. I had already moved to LA. I got a call later offering me a job in Detroit to do like an Entertainment Tonight kind of show. But I had decided I really didn't want to do television. I wanted to, act and sing.
Wow. That's incredible story and a kind of a great pivot, but I guess getting used to the camera, that certainly helped. And obviously, it was a live show, so that kind of prepped you for a lot of things. Any Bobby Knight interviews?
You know what? He did his talk show at the same station.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one thing I heard that, like, he would say things like, on the air live, like, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. This is like Indiana, so they're very conservative and everything. Yeah, he was a hellraiser. Well, everybody knows that. He was there when I was there, and we won the NCAA championship my sophomore year. So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was the 70s undefeated team, right? Quinn Buckner, the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I did have Quinn, and who was the really tall one? Can't remember. Maybe. I don't remember. I had them on my show, actually. I interviewed them, and I was very intimidated. It is, for me, and I'm tall, I'm 5'8", and they were, whatever they were. And when they walked into the studio and I had to walk out to meet them, I remember just being totally taken aback by their size. And yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it's just a small world when you start to connect these dots. I always love those kind of things when you can start connecting these. Like who knew? Randy Macho Man Savage's brother, Bobby Knight, Seinfeld. It's all connected. And speaking of, the Hellraiser that you mentioned, Bobby Knight. Chris mentioned at the top, we love this episode, The Subway, and we really like a lot of the earlier season show episodes, and a lot of it has to do with Larry Charles, actually, who wrote your episode, and Larry David, and just the New York gritty darkness of it all, right? Here you are robbing this guy in a subway, scamming him, right? You got Kramer going to an OTB seedy little area, right? All the group. It's that early 90s New York kind of vibe. And Seinfeld sitcoms weren't really like that at the time. This kind of little bit of dark edge to things, right? Like in a normal sitcom, I don't think you would have been robbing him of $8 and his clothes and leaving him handcuffed to a bed at the time in 1991, right? So
in this whole script, I actually threw him the key at the end.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they cut that out.
And how'd that get cut out, for time?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
I don't even remember reading all these scenes, the parts that were cut. So I don't know, but it says, revised table draft, which would have been like after we did the table read, they would have gone back and rewritten it. So they did, take some things out and
Right. And it's interesting because it's one of those things you think about continuity wise, like how did George get out of there, right? And they probably
yes,
thought of it and solved it with just throw him the key, and then they cut it.
yeah.
So now they leave us all thinking he must have somehow some housekeeper came in maybe and finally let him out or something. Like
Well,
it
in
is
this draft, um, I can't believe this. I just couldn't believe it when I read it. When they cut back to us, he was handcuffed to the bed wearing a baby bonnet and a diaper, and I was taking Polaroid pictures of him. And he's like, "You're not going to use those against me, are you?" And then I said, "Well, it depends," or something. That's up to you. Like, I was going to scam him to pay me off to not, release them wherever they would go. Then, so I guess. So anyway, that would have been too complicated. What we ended up with was just perfect, I think.
It was, but I'm speechless. I love that story. That's a Larry Charles added an extra little twist to that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you kept the script. We've talked to hundreds of guest stars, right, Chris? And not many of them have brought the script with them. I don't know if any of them have. Maybe one or two, but that's great that you saved it and then you were able
I
to kind
didn't
of go
remember
back.
I had saved it. I'll talk with you later about it, but I'm doing an autographing event in March, and I had to go digging through all the boxes of all the photos I had over the years, and I came across the scripts, and I didn't remember I had them, and I thought, this is perfect, So
That is unbelievable. And to your point, in our minds, it is a perfect episode. It's one of those episodes where like you kind of want more. It's that good, right? And it's funny they left a lot of that stuff out or cut a lot of that stuff. But yeah, and even just the interactions. I mean, you're in the bathroom, you're actually talking with George. When he's talking about his mother and Shirley Booth, Hazel, the
Hazel.
whole thing. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, just yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, and we mentioned Larry Charles, you mentioned Tom Sharonis and Jason. Obviously, I think they had a big impact on the show. But the writer Larry Charles, was he? Do you remember him at all? Kind of having any, I guess, directional
He was
input?
at the table read. I'm sure I met him.
Right.
It's embarrassing, though. A lot of the time, the more behind the scenes people you don't get to know, and you're grateful to them that they wrote you this incredible stuff that you get to play. But I don't recall that I got to really know him at all.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it was 30 something years ago as well. I don't expect to remember everything. But I
Right.
mean, that was such a fun episode. Like you mentioned, it was unique because you were saying there was no audience. So were you hanging around during all scenes? Like Ernie Sabella, I know, was another guest star on that show. He was, the naked guy. Um,
I had worked with him on something else, maybe a stage show. I honestly don't recall, but I kind of knew who he was, and I couldn't remember from where. So, yeah, he was great.
yeah, hell of an actor. And he ended up, what did he
Um,
do? Pumbaa, The Lion King, the whole thing. He's had a great career for sure.
well,
But
as
just,
far as what I do remember, what's funny is that now all I remember on the subway car was Jason and me. I don't remember the director. I'm sure he stepped in and gave us notes or whatever. I don't remember even how many takes we did. It seemed to go really fast. I don't think we did more than 2 or 3. And I don't even remember the camera being there, which is shocking because it seemed to always feel like I knew that the camera was there. So uh, it was just fun magic for me to have that opportunity and to play off of him. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and as Chris mentioned, it was definitely we it's one of our favorite episodes, and for good reason. And you mentioned a couple of times the fact that there was really no audience and that it was all kind of shot on those cars, and this is one of those things that Seinfeld later became really known for, where they kind of have the 4 different stories going. In this case, they didn't all intertwine, but they kind of did. But they did all shoot sort of their subway scenes and all of that, right? So I'm just curious if that lent
They were,
itself.
and they redressed it.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing that you were all kind of around for that. So it must have made for a this is a question more than an assumption, but more of a tight knit, I guess, dynamic or group, even with the stars of the show, where they didn't go to it wasn't like a big set. There was kind of like all kind of there. Did that get that vibe at all, or
I
it
don't
was just kind of
I don't remember that.
yeah,
I remember seeing them at the table read and meeting them, and I would see them when we were there at the same time, maybe between takes or something.
mm,
But I don't remember the
yeah, that's fair.
other than really what I told you about that.
Yeah. And so the aftermath of Seinfeld, we like to kind of touch on a little bit. Like you said, it was a hit, right? This is season 3 still. Uh, tens of Chris probably knows the exact number, but definitely in the tens of millions of people probably saw this, right? After Seinfeld, did this sort of, you know, the cachet of that, or even on the streets, where you're more getting recognized as, as the woman from the subway. Did you notice kind of a bump there, if you will, from the Seinfeld universe? Because Seinfeld fans can be very uh, not intimidating, intense, I guess the word I'm
Oh,
looking
like
for.
they really come
Yeah, yeah,
they're your
yeah.
best friend. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Much. Um, when I worked in Boston on Spencer for Hire, when I walked down the street, I would hear people behind me going, "That's Susan Silverman," and that was where we were recognized. Robert had the story he just thought was hysterical. We were shooting near the subway one day, and some guy came up out of the station, and he goes, "Oh my God, it's Rabbit Unit," and Robert just fell on the floor laughing about that, and we were really part of the city in a lot of ways, and but no, I don't recall anything specific, but I will tell you now. Um, I ran into somebody. We looked at each other. We knew we had known each other or worked together before, and we had both been actors. And and they said, "So what have you done?" I said, "Well, I did this series Spencer for Hire, and I was on Dallas." And they're going, "No, no." And I said, "Oh, well, I did this kind of memorable episode of Seinfeld." And they said, "Oh, "That's it. You were on the subway." So yeah. So
It's
yes, that happened actually a lot lately because I mean, look, I am a lot older than I was then, and nobody ever recognizes me anymore, really. So I mean, especially I go out without makeup a lot, so I tried to dress up nice today for you guys and do the hair and
Barbara.
makeup.
You look, and for all those on audio, Barbara looks fantastic.
Incredible,
Don't let her
incredible.
tell you otherwise. But it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, so many hit shows. I mean, you're on The Facts of Life, Murder She Wrote. So all these iconic kind of '80s, early '90s shows, and
I wrote down all the actors. Can I tell you
yeah,
how incredible actors and actresses I worked with? I did my first professional musical show was in LA. I was in the chorus. It was Bells Are Ringing with Florence Henderson and Dean Jones. And
wow,
that was incredible. Then I did a double episode of Murder She Wrote. So I worked with the incredible Angela Lansbury, and Florence Henderson played my mother, this was after I had done the other show. So that was amazing.
Courtney Cox was in that episode too, I believe.
Who? I'm
Courtney
sorry.
Cox.
Who was she?
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting, I got to know her because we had the same accountant.
Huh.
Uh,
Small world.
and also Michael J. Fox a little bit because of that we had the same accountant. So I don't remember her being in that. It must have been at the very beginning of her career. No,
Yeah, that was in 1986.
I
So
don't.
yeah, probably right after Dancing in the Dark. Yeah, pretty much.
It was, I'm trying to think. I knew her from somewhere. Um, yeah, I think I invited her. When I bought my first house, I think I invited her to my housewarming party. I think she was there. I knew her a little bit,
Yeah,
but
the
yeah.
accountant. I love the accountant story.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, the accountant invited me to go to the Emmys and with Michael J. Fox. I sat next to Michael at the dinner afterwards at the Emmys. So that was really
wow.
fun.
So I mean, man. All right. So late '80s, like
Let's hear the rest of the list.
yeah, oh yeah. Go to the rest of the list. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. William Shatner,
Heard of
Uh,
him.
what was the show? T.J. Hooker. Oh,
Oh,
and the actress who was on that, Heather Locklear. I didn't write that down. And then when I did Nine, the musical on Broadway, Raul Julia was starring in it. I was in it his last month with him, and then Sergio Franchi, who had a huge career in Vegas and did movies and things like that, he came in and replaced him. And then, of course, Robert Urich and Avery Brooks on Spencer. And Bruce Willis, I worked with on Moonlighting. And I realized that I had met him years before when I was doing Nine. Do you have time for all this?
of course. I
Okay.
love it.
This is an amazing thing. So I was in New York doing Nine, and Melanie Griffith and I had the same manager. And so we would get together occasionally. And in fact, and Kevin Kline, who had also gone to Indiana University before me, but he was doing, so I was doing Nine, Melanie was doing a film, and Kevin Kline was doing Richard III in Central Park, and we went to see him one night. And she set me up on a blind date with him. And we had a very nice evening, but nothing came of it. So another time, though, Melanie and some of her friends, I don't remember who, but we went to a bar and we picked up this friend of theirs who was getting off work as a bartender. I realized later it was Bruce Willis. He wasn't even, I'm sure he had some acting stuff going on, but then when I saw him on Moonlighting, I was like, oh my God. And we had such a fun night that night. Yeah, so kind of neat.
Incredible.
Huh?
Yeah, no,
Okay,
just an
here's the rest of my
incredible.
list. Let's see. I can't read my writing. Oh, okay. So I did a show called The Yellow Rose, which actually was the same producer. They said they were going to add me to the cast of the next season if it got picked up, but it didn't. And the producer John Wilder went on to produce Spencer for Hire.
Yeah, Sam Elliott was in that too.
I'm sorry, Lou?
Sam Elliott was in that too, The Yellow
Exactly.
Rose.
So
Yeah.
yes, Sybil Shepherd.
And Sybil Shepherd. Yeah.
I worked with Sybil twice then because I did Moonlighting, and then I had done this show. And let's see who else was on. David Soul, rest in peace. I was really sad to hear that he passed away recently. And Sam Elliott, David Soul. Oh, and Edward Albert Jr. And he later played my ex-husband on a soap opera, Port Charles. So that was amazing. Then
Little Knight Rider? Got a little Knight Rider in there?
Oh yeah, David Hasselhoff. Yeah, he was wonderful. We shot that in San Francisco. It was a 2-part episode, and it was during the 1984 Olympics, and you couldn't shoot in LA because there were too many people coming in. So we went up there, and they took such good care of us. They put us up at this amazing hotel, the Four Seasons Clift, I think it was called then. And we all had so much fun. We went out as a group, every night. He was wonderful to work with. Really fun.
Yeah, just looking to the Twilight Zone, I know you were in an episode of, and it's interesting because if you would have known Larry Charles, the writer of your episode, is a huge Twilight Zone fan. I think I think a lot of his writing ties into that. He actually did a show after Seinfeld. It didn't get picked up, I don't think, but it had sort of a Twilight Zone feel to it, I believe. So it's always interesting.
Well, you know what? I just became friends on Facebook, and actually we got together for coffee with Bob Underwood. He had contacted me telling me that he liked what I had done with his episode of Twilight Zone. And so that was just so sweet of him. And so, yeah, we had coffee just like a couple of months ago, and we're supposed to get together again. Anyway, he's still busy writing, and yeah.
Wow. I mean, what a career. And
so lucky.
It's so lucky. I mean, you had a gift. So, but such a gift. I think you knew that. Someone recognized that. And obviously in Indiana, it kind of took off from there. But I mean, what a career. At what point did you say no more acting? I know you're doing a ton with interior design. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that, or what you're up to, or, it's got to be hard to give up. You mentioned all these people and these parties and this and that, having so much fun. Tell us a little bit about how you got away from that.
I'll keep those for myself.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. I met my husband on a film called Vern Miller, and it starred Scott Glenn. I played his girlfriend. So that was just a big incredible thing for me. And I played a singer, so I got to sing in the movie, but I ended up also writing some of the music. And the soundtrack was written, the rest of the parts, I wrote a few songs and they incorporated them into the film. Um, but Tom Chase and Steve Rucker were the composers, and did all the soundtrack. And Buddy Collette and Abe Most played, who were saxophone, incredibly legendary musicians. I never knew that till recently, and I knew that the soundtrack was incredible. But they played my music. And that was so incredibly exciting to me. So that's actually kind of at this phase in my life. I'm actually wanting to. I have a stack like this thick of music that I've written over the years. I have a dear friend from college at IU, Joey Singer, an incredible pianist. He was Debbie Reynolds' conductor and pianist for 35 years. And he lives in Vegas, and I'm hoping to get together with him and write some more. So
That's
anyway,
incredible.
that
That's
happens
really,
with it.
yeah, that's really, I mean, I was just, you mentioned Buddy Collette. I had to look it up. Yeah, he's played with some amazing people. I mean, Miles
Yeah,
Davis, Sammy Davis Jr., Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, um,
yeah,
that's impressive.
they were amazing. The soundtrack was beautiful, and it's impossible to find. I have some cassette tapes that I want to get converted so I can actually listen to it digitally now. And but anyway, let's see. What were you asking me? About what I'm doing. So how I transitioned from acting to interior design. Um, well, my son Logan was born in 1994, and I took a year off and stayed home with him. And my husband was a producer. Like I said, I met him on this film, and we kind of I did it. The first show that I did back to acting was like a two-part episode, I think, of Touched by an Angel. And my son was only a year old. I had to take the nanny and my son with me, and it's kind of hard. And then the next job I got after that was I was so lucky. I did this. It was called Hijacked Flight, I don't know, 284 or something like that. And I was playing opposite James Brolin, and we were co-pilots of this plane that gets hijacked. Ali Sheedy was in it too, and she had a 3-year-old daughter, and I had my son there. So anyway, that was an incredible opportunity for me too. But I was starting to get older. The phone wasn't ringing as much, and I wasn't as motivated. And I fell in love actually with interior design. Actually, when I was working with Robert Urich, he bought an incredible house in Boston, and it needed to be redone. And they had his wife and Sharmi Brent, their designer, had starred in. They were the two of the children in The Sound of Music, with the movie and so. Sharmi was their designer, and she did an incredible job on this house. I was so just impressed with her work and thinking, oh God. And then after the first year of Spencer for Hire, I bought my first house, and it was definitely kind of a fixer. It was old. It was built in 1938, which there weren't that many of those houses in LA. And so, so I did our own houses. My husband and I bought a vacation home on Kauai. We had that for a while, and we got hit by a hurricane there and had to do some remodeling and things. So, and I would stay up till 2 a.m. drafting, drawing, doing designs, and so eventually we ended up. I designed 2 3-story hillside homes in Sherman Oaks, and my husband built them. We had a partner, and then they hired us to do another house, and people started just coming to the job site, neighbors, and say, will you do our house too? So that's how that developed. And we realized we wanted to stay home with our son. And when he was producing, it was 16-hour days, and same thing for me, or I'd be on location, and and so it was just kind of a natural transition. So
Wow. That's
very long version.
yeah, beautiful story. But I think with the you're creative, whether it's in
Yeah.
acting, the music you're talking about, or design. You have a creative mind, and we always like to ask. You mentioned your son. You know, this younger generation. Is he a Seinfeld fan? Is he catching up through Netflix? What does he think of your episode? Would love to hear.
Oh, he's
How
seen
many
my
different-
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely seen the episode. I don't know if I didn't even ask him. I should.
we gotta.
He's the next generation of filmmakers, though. He is. In fact, I'm going to hit you up for some help spreading the word about his short film that he's going to be shooting. So,
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
director and screenwriter, and really good. So he won one short film festival, and he's hoping to get this one into some major ones. So,
Oh, wow.
That's
Awesome.
great.
Yeah, we'd love to promote that when this go live and share it out. Absolutely.
great.
He's now a friend of the show. So there we go. Logan.
Ah,
Barbara, this is great. I mean, you are an inspiration. I mean, just what a career you've had. And just your Seinfeld experience alone, how you went in, got a little flustered, and then just killed it. Just killed it. I mean, Subway's one of our favorite episodes. You're one of our favorite guest stars of all time on one of our favorite shows. So we cannot thank you enough.
wow, thanks.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
I'm
This was so
really
great.
happy I did this, and I really was scared, and I hard for you to imagine, but I was worried I wouldn't have enough to say.
Oh no, this
Oh
was
boy.
great. Are you kidding? I mean, the script alone. I'm so glad. I have to say it again. I'm so glad you had the script because I'm always. I think it's fascinating to just the editing process, whether it's during the taping or during a rewrites or on a table read. There's so much, and you never know. And as Chris mentioned, they ended up with the perfect episode, however they did it, right? And you have those pieces in that script that'll live on as far as what they, what could have been and what kept out and all that stuff. It's great. This was great.
Oh, Barbara, where are you doing that autograph session?
Oh, okay. Thank you for asking. It is called, let me make sure I get it right. Apparently, this is an ongoing thing, and I was contacted for the first time about it. It is called The Hollywood Show, and they have them, I think, every 3 months. This one is March 1st and 2nd, and it is going to be at the Burbank Marriott in the Convention Center. And people can go online for Hollywood Show to, Google that, and that will give all the information. And they're doing a Dallas reunion. So, tons of people are going to be there, and from all of the people who had regular roles from the cast, and Scott, who runs the show, did say to me, "Well, wait till your Seinfeld fans find you there." So I'm hoping people come out.
We'll
Yeah,
see. Yeah.
Really
yeah.
fun for me.
Well, Barbara,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
again so much. This was a real treat. We can't thank you
Ooh.
enough.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great night.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Bye. You too.
Bye.